In this lesson, we're going to start assembling the engine. Please navigate to the engine folder in your working files folder. I recommend using the setting for large icons. This way you can visually identify each part as well as identifying it by name. I'm going to push this off the screen, but I'm going to continue using it, and you just need to keep it open in a place where it's handy. Let's start by creating a brand new assembly. Use your Infinite Skills assembly template. Make sure it's an assembly template. You'll know it's an assembly template when you open it up and you see the assembly icon in the Feature Manager. Also, you'll see the assembly name at the top of the window. I'm going to go ahead and save this assembly. Just save it anywhere where you like to keep your Infinite Skills documents. Give it a name, New Engine. Now, the first part I'm going to call in is going to be a part that remains fixed. It doesn't move, and all the other parts kind of relate to it. And that describes, I think, the engine block. So I'm just going to grab that from the Windows Explorer window and drag it in. Now notice that the part has an origin, that's that blue set of arrows, and the assembly also has an origin. So I'm going to bring the cursor over the assembly origin, and it should snap right into place, and then I'll just drop it there. Now we've got a couple entities in here that we don't need. One of them is this plane, so I'll right-click on the plane and scroll down to hide. There is also a hide under the component area, but if you do that, you're going to hide the entire part rather than just hiding the feature. Let's do that again for the sketch, but for the sketch, it'll be much easier. Just left-click on the sketch and click on hide. Another thing to notice about the engine block is that it came in with an F in front of the name of the part. This F stands for fixed, which means it's fixed in space. If I try to move it, it's not going to move. In fact, if I try to move it, it gives me this message that says the selected component is fixed. It cannot be moved. That's really what we want the engine block to be. We just want it to be a component that's fixed in space and it's not going to go anywhere. Now, the next part that we're going to put in is a journal bearing, and we need a pair of these. So go back to your Windows Explorer window and find the part that's called Main Journal Bearings and drag a copy of that into your SOLIDWORKS window. Now we're going to try to place one of these using SmartMates and one of these just using regular mates, just to give you an idea of how both functions work. Let's start with using regular mates. Click on the Mate paperclip from the Assembly toolbar. Click on the cylindrical face of the bearing, the cylindrical face of the engine block, and then click on the right mouse button. Next, we'll click on this small lip, the flat face on the bearing, and flip the assembly over and click on this flat face on the outside of the part. And then again, click the right mouse button. Now this second mate, this planar to planar face, would not work very well if the engine block had draft on it. Draft would make this outer face angled, and the lip is not angled. In SOLIDWORKS, mates have to be exact. They can't be approximate. If you're a couple of degrees off, that's going to cause the mate to fail. In this case, we don't have to worry about draft, so we'll just keep going. Now we want to put another bearing on the other end. So I'm going to hold down Control and grab the first bearing and just pull it over here. What Control does is Control drag is Windows for copy. And now let's try to use SmartMates to snap this part into place. I'll hold down Alt, grab this part from the edge, and drag it into place. When it snaps, you may have to use Tab to get it to go the right direction. And then release. Now we just want to look at the mates and make sure everything worked out okay. The first part had a concentric and a coincident mate. It was easy to create those. We just created them manually. The second part also has concentric and coincident mates. Those were even easier to create because we used SmartMates to create them. I want to point out a couple of things here. There are some people who will not like the fact that this bearing can rotate in place. You can't really see it rotate aside from the bearing origin at the center. You can see that going around as I move the cursor. You can tell that it's not locked by the minus in front of it. Let's go to the front plane of that particular bearing and control select the gasket surface of the engine block. And we'll use mate. And rather than coincident, let's just use parallel. It's a little more forgiving in this case, and we'll just accept that. Now, if we look at the main journal bearing part again, the second instance, which you can see listed in brackets here, this is the first instance, the second instance. We've got 3 mates, which fully define the part, and the minus sign is gone, which means it's fully defined. But the other part is still underdefined. The other part is still going to rotate. Let's verify that, and there it rotates. So let's go to the top plane for that part. Control select the bearing surface. Use the mate tool. And we'll mate parallel again instead of coincident. And click OK. Now let's get out of the mate tool. The minus is gone, and we try to rotate this part. It's not rotating. Now SOLIDWORKS is telling us the selected component is fully defined and it cannot be moved. That's all good news. So now we've got our bearings in there and the proper orientation. Let's put the crankshaft in place. Go back to your Windows Explorer window, grab the crankshaft, and just drag it into the SOLIDWORKS assembly. The easiest way to place this is just to use SmartMates. All we need right now is a concentric mate. So hold down Alt, grab the crankshaft from one end, and pull it onto the inside surface of the journal bearing and just drop it. And we'll say OK there. It doesn't matter if this is flipped one end to the other because it's a symmetrical part the way we've created it. And SOLIDWORKS is not offended if we push one part through the other. We will center up the lobes of the crankshaft on the cylinders when we go ahead and put the pistons in place. And that will come in the next lesson.